I'm Sherry Freemuth. I'm a senior planner with JUB Engineers in Meridian, Idaho. I've been a certified planner for decades now. I started out my career working for local governments, helping them with their zoning ordinances, design and development standards, and other requirements that they have, both in California and in Idaho. After leaving local government service, I went to work as a consultant, and I've been a consultant ever since, again, helping local communities across Idaho with their comprehensive planning and land use needs. Other videos in this series describe the dimensional standards included in most zoning ordinances. This video will describe other zoning tools to provide flexibility in development while ensuring that the community goals for quality development are met. These tools include site plan and cluster development. Site plan review takes the dimensional standards a step further. Zoning regulations create the three-dimensional building envelope and set out basic site layout standards such as setbacks. But by their nature, these regulations cannot be site-specific. Instead, they establish general regulations for every property within a zoning district. Site plan review allows a community to look at the specific location of the use or structure, the layout of the site, including pedestrian and auto circulation, and the materials used throughout the development. Site plan reviews address the potential impacts that the layout and location of buildings, parking, outside activity areas, and access have on adjoining properties. In addition, site plan review assures that potential development meets the standards of the zoning ordinance, such as landscaping, parking, site coverage, pedestrian and vehicular circulation, and stormwater runoff. Site plan review also can protect and preserve desirable topographical and natural features on the site. The site plan review application typically consists of detailed drawings to scale of site features and proposed improvements to the site. Sometimes it includes building elevations and design. Review of site plans should be based on standards and criteria set forth in the zoning codes. Some best practices that should be considered in the ordinance and reflected on a site plan include the following: location of compatible uses adjacent to one another, both on and off-site. Minimize significant changes to topography and preserve unique natural features. Provide for pedestrian and bicycle connectivity. Connect to existing off-site utilities and services to minimize the demand for additional municipal services, utilities, and infrastructure. The design of the circulation systems should minimize dangerous traffic movements, provide adequate and safe access to the site, separate pedestrian and auto circulation, and minimize curb cuts. The design of off-street parking lots or garages should minimize impacts on adjacent properties and promote logical, safe parking and interconnection with adjacent parking lots. The design of landscaping, screening, and related improvements should provide transitions to adjoining lots and developments, create a desirable and functional environment for motorists, pedestrians, occupants of residential dwellings, business owners, and employees, screen incompatible uses, and minimize the visual impact of the development on adjacent sites and roadways. Any site must be accessible to police, fire, and other municipal services such as snow plowing. The requirements for site plan review can vary depending on the community desires and the expertise to review and evaluate a site plan. Good site plan review is not arbitrary. Site plan review should be based on guidelines driven by community land use policies and regulations. An official site plan review manual that sets forth the community's accepted design practices is an important resource for both the planning staff and interested developers. The preparation of such a manual can smooth the site plan review process and provide strong justification for the review's findings. Photographs and illustrations of the desired end result can only help the process. Site plan review can be a part of a conditional use permit or a separate application as required by the zoning code. Many communities have adopted site plan review as a way to review the layout of development, even when the use is permitted in the zoning district. Site plan review is primarily a technical process and ideally should be a staff function if the expertise exists. When those resources are not available, the review process is undertaken by local officials, usually the Planning and Zoning Commission. If site plan review is subject to public hearing, a cautionary note is that testimony should be limited to the merits of the site plan, not to the use or the density of the development. Cluster development. Cluster development is a form of land development in which principal buildings and/or lots are grouped together on a site, thus saving the remaining land area for common open space, conservation, agriculture, recreation, and public or semi-public uses. Cluster development is used in residential zoning districts. Cluster development has a number of distinct advantages over conventional development, which are: a well-planned cluster development concentrates dwelling units on the most buildable portion of the site and preserves natural drainage systems, vegetation, open space, and other significant natural features. Clustering can control and reduce the costs of stormwater runoff and soil erosion. The common areas can function as a trap for nutrients dissolved or suspended in stormwater runoff. With dwelling units located closer together, travel time for service vehicles is reduced. Where clustering is accompanied by higher density residential land uses and pedestrian pathways and bikeways, there are greater opportunities for exercise and better connection to community services. Clustering also enhances the sense of community, allowing parents better supervision of children playing in common areas and promoting social interaction among neighbors. Since cluster development changes the net density and minimum lot dimensions otherwise required in the zoning district, allowances for cluster development should be provided for in the zoning code and applied through the subdivision process with review and approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission and elected officials. Critical to the review of a cluster development proposal is the provision of a site plan, as described earlier. The site plan for a residential cluster development shall include, but shall not be limited to, the following information: the maximum number and type of dwelling units proposed, the areas of the site on which the dwelling units are to be constructed. This may take the form of the footprint of the dwelling unit or a building envelope showing the general area in which the dwelling unit is to be located. The calculations for the permitted number of dwelling units, the areas of the site on which other proposed uses may be located and their size, the areas of the site designated for common open space and their size, the areas of the site designated for parking and loading and the size of individual spaces, the location of sidewalks, trails, and bike paths, the number of acres that are proposed to be conveyed as common open space. Any ordinance establishing cluster development should include the criteria in which the project will be reviewed. Some suggestions are: the site plan meets the code requirements for cluster development. Buildings are adequately grouped so that the minimum percent of site area as established by the code is set aside as common open space. For example, 15% of the site area must be an open space. To the greatest degree practicable, common open space shall be designated as a single block and not divided into unconnected small parcels located in various parts of the development. Pedestrians can easily access common open space. The site plan identifies minimum buffers as established by the code adjacent to environmental features, such as wetlands and surface waters, including creeks, streams, springs, lakes, and ponds. Individual lots, buildings, streets, and parking areas are situated to minimize the alteration of natural features, natural vegetation, and topography. Existing scenic views or vistas are permitted to remain unobstructed from public streets and spaces. The site plan accommodates and preserves any features of historic, cultural, or archaeological value, and floodplains, wetlands, and areas with steep slopes as established by the code are protected from development. Here is an undeveloped site. Here is the site developed with a standard subdivision. Here is the site with cluster development. Density zoning is a further extension of cluster zoning. It offers the community and the developer substantial flexibility in site design if overall density restrictions and other requirements are met. Under this approach, any type of dwelling is permitted, from detached homes to apartments, so long as total density does not exceed the maximum permitted. It is also similar to planned unit development that is the subject of another video in this series.